Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take another quick look at the game Crootle. Now this game is for 2 to 4 players, ages 7 and up, with the average play time being about 15 minutes. Now just to give you a little backstory, Crootle was on Kickstarter back in, I want to say August or September of 2013. Unfortunately, it didn't make its Kickstarter goal. That's this game here. Since then, the developers have redone the game, maybe spruced a few things up, and this was developed. And I was sent this prototype copy just the other day. So we're here just to take a quick look at this new version and see if it's any different than the Crootle that I covered back in late 2013. So with that being said, let's just take a quick moment to open the box, see what's inside, and we'll go from there. Okay, the first thing I want to mention right off the bat that this is a prototype copy. This is not the final version, so everything that you see here is obviously subject to change. With that being said, I have the older version of Crootle right next to the board here, just so you can see the differences between the two. In fact, this was actually the box or the case that the original game came in. As you can see, it's rectangular in shape. And it would make a great travel version with the exception of these sharp corners here. Instead of that, the game now comes in a full-fledged box. And as far as the older game goes, it came with this strip of paper that was used to measure out the dimensions of the playing area, just so players can sort of set up the corners of the board. In this case, you actually have a board. You don't have a strip of paper. You just have a full board here. It's a 16 by 16 grid, and you've got some spaces along the perimeter just to place your corner tiles, which I'll explain in a minute. Now, the game also comes with these color distribution charts. Basically, it just tells you all of the different pieces that are in the game, and it looks like there's 4 of them, 1 for each player. Now, the tiles themselves really haven't changed in terms of function. However, they do look and feel a little bit different in this newer version. These are the tiles from the older version. Again, this was from late 2013, around August or September. As you can see, these tiles are a little bit thinner and can bend if you put some effort into it. The tiles from the newer version are much thicker, and I think are of better quality. Now, it's important to note that these are prototypes. These aren't the final version of these tiles. I'm told that these will eventually become laminated. For those of you that haven't heard of this game up to this point, I just want to briefly touch on the components and the rules just to give you an idea as to what this game is all about. These are corner tiles. They are solid of one color and are either red, blue, green, or yellow. These guys over here are color tiles. They are made up of either 2, 3, or 4 different colors, and as you can see, these colors match the corner tiles. You've got yellow, blue, green, and red. Before we launch into game setup, I just want to briefly note that there are 2 different rule sets for this game. There is the quick play rule set and the advanced rule set. For the sake of time, I'm going to focus on the quick play. However, I will briefly touch on the advanced rule set a little bit later. Now, with that being said, a game setup isn't all that difficult. Each player will receive a corner tile of each color, yellow, green, red, and blue. They'll go ahead and place these face down, mix them up, and then choose 2. They'll place these tiles, again, face down, on these spaces along the perimeter of the board. Each player will be doing this. The others are just simply placed back into the box, but keep them in reach as they will play a role in the advanced rule set. Now, the board will also receive a set of corner tiles. Again, these are mixed up face down, and they are placed along the corners of the board. Now, if you want a quicker game, you can utilize this darker inner square here. You can put the corner tiles like this. This just limits the dimensions of the board and will make the game quicker. If you are playing with the quick play variant, you can use this. The manual suggests, however, that if you're using the advanced rule set, you'll want to make use of the full 16 by 16 grid. Once all of the players have chosen 2 of these corner tiles face down, they'll go ahead and all reveal them at once. They'll also reveal the corner tiles on the board. and they'll be able to see which two colors they have to connect. In this case, you've got a yellow and green here, meaning that this player must connect the yellow and the green corners in order to win the game. Now at the beginning of the game, each player will draw 10 of these color tiles face up in front of them to form their starting hand. On a player's turn, they'll be able to play a total of 3 of these color tiles. Now there's a few movement rules that players will have to observe in order to do so. For one, you can only build off of the corner tiles of your color. In this case, this player has a yellow and green corner tile, so they could only build off of the yellow and green corners on the board. When placing a color tile, you have to make sure that the colors match, sort of like in dominoes. In this case, you've got a yellow corner tile, and you've got this color tile here with 2 yellow on this side, so these would match, and this placement would be legal. If the player wanted to take this a step further, they'd have to find one with a red and a blue on this side, and just so happens I have one. And again, if the player wanted to take that a step further to try and get to green, they can go ahead and place another one. There's blue and red here, blue and red there. These match, that placement would be legal. It's important to note that the player cannot play tiles diagonally like this. It's either going to be directly adjacent, horizontally, or vertically. Now, once the player has played as many tiles as they can, up to 3, they'll go ahead and draw more from the bag in order to increase their hand size back up to 10. Once they do that, the next player will take their turn, and then they'll take their turn, and so on and so forth around the table, until one player manages to connect the 2 corner tiles of their color. The first person to do so will win the game. Now, the advanced rule set is somewhat similar to quick play, but there are some differences. For one, the advanced rule set is played over a number of rounds or games, so you'll be playing multiple games. And the first player to reach 100 points will actually win the entire game. Now, as far as that is concerned, game setup for each game is the same. You'll randomly place these corner tiles face down in the corners. Each player will randomly get 2 of these corner tiles, flip them over all at once, do the same thing with the board, and every player will have 2 corners that they'll be attempting to connect. Now, game setup, for the most part, is the same, but the differences don't really become apparent until you actually start playing the game. For one, player turns are timed. Each player has about 90 seconds to complete their turn, a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on what players want to do. In the quick play rule set, you are limited to only playing 3 of your color tiles. In the advanced rule set, you can play as many as you want to. If you manage to use all 10, you can draw 5 more from the bag and use them immediately as a bonus. That is a one-time deal. Something else worth noting, if a player manages to create a 4 square like this, it's harder than it looks, they'll be granted 2 more of these color tiles from the bag for their turn. They also may or may not play a part during endgame scoring, depending on the circumstances. Now, at the beginning of a player's turn, they'll have the option to swap corner tiles. This can only happen once per player per round. Basically, all that involves is the player choosing one of the corner tiles in front of them and swapping it out with another color they're not using. They'll take the colors that they're not using, mix them up, and choose one to put in its place. Now, once that is done, the player will go ahead and take their turn as normal. However, doing this will cost the player 20 points at the end of the current round. One final thing worth mentioning, when a player is done taking their turn, they'll draw 5 tiles from the stack to place into their hand. In the quick play version, you just simply drew up to 10. You were limited to playing 3, and you drew up to 10 at the end of your turn. In this case, you would just draw 5 tiles at the end of your turn, regardless of how many tiles that you placed. Now, this will continue around the table with players taking turns until one player manages to connect the 2 corner tiles of their color. At the end of a particular round or game, the player who made the connection and won the game will actually be the one who scores. The other players may lose 20 points, though, depending on whether or not they've swapped for that round. Now, to score, the player will count up how many tiles are in that path, including the corner tiles. Each tile is worth 1 point. They'll count up how many tiles are in that path. They'll give themselves 2 bonus points for all 4 squares in that path. If you have more than one path, use the shortest path. You'll also add up how many tiles are left over from the other players in their hands, subtract out how many tiles are in your current hand, and then you'll also subtract out 20 points if you've swapped for that round. After you do the math, hopefully you'll be left with a positive value, and you'll write that value on a separate piece of paper. The first player to reach 100 points after a number of games will win. And there you have it. That's just a very brief look at the game Crootle. I didn't cover all of the rules found in the manual, but this should just give you a nice general overview as far as how the game plays out. Now, from what I'm told, the developer hasn't made a decision yet as far as whether or not the game will be reappearing on Kickstarter. If it does, it will be sometime in early February 2014. I'll post a link in the below description if the developers go that route, or if they decide to go with a different option. Now, as far as the written preview goes, there's also a link in the below description. Definitely check that out. You can also find it at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com. This is Vince. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.